Leah, like many teenagers, loved using social media. However, it's hard to tell who's really on the other side of the screen, whether they're a friend or someone pretending to be nice, but is actually dangerous. Leah was born on March 21, 2001, in Clarksville, Tennessee. She had an older brother named Quan, who was 3 years older. After their parents, Lena and Philip, decided to split up, Lena wanted a safer, quieter place for her kids away from the busy city. She moved Leah and Quan to a small town called Spring Valley in Illinois, where they had family. This meant the kids could grow up with their cousins. Spring Valley is a small, friendly town by the Illinois River. In 2002, it had just about 5,000 people and hasn't grown much since. There aren't big malls or skyscrapers, but the people there are close and support each other. Lena got a job as a cook in a nursing home and worked there for over 15 years to make sure her kids had what they needed. Since Lena was often busy, Quan took on the role of looking after Leah. They became very close, almost like best friends. Leah also spent a lot of time with her cousin Gia, and they looked so much alike that people sometimes thought they were twins. Later, Lena had 2 more children, a girl named Gia and a boy named Noah. Although Spring Valley was a great place for families, one problem was that there wasn't much for teenagers to do. This lack of activities meant that teenagers like Leah often turned to the internet and social media for entertainment and to connect with others. Leah was particularly active online, where she enjoyed chatting with friends and meeting new people. But this digital world can sometimes be risky, especially for young people. As Leah grew older, her mother Lena worried about the time Leah spent online. She tried to encourage her daughter to engage in more local activities like sports or clubs, but options were limited in Spring Valley. Despite these concerns, Lena trusted Leah to manage her own social interactions, hoping that the strong family values she instilled would guide her safely through the complexities of online relationships. Quan, acting as both brother and mentor, also kept a watchful eye on Leah. He often talked with her about the importance of being cautious online, reminding her that people might not always be who they seem. These conversations were a mix of brotherly advice and friendly chats, strengthening their bond even further. Meanwhile, Leah's relationship with her cousin Gia provided her with a close confidant with whom she could share her online experiences and teenage dilemmas. Their friendship offered Leah a sense of security and belonging, reinforcing the idea that she wasn't alone in navigating the challenges of adolescence. As Leah and her family navigated these aspects of teenage life, the tight-knit community of Spring Valley also played a crucial role. Neighbors looked out for one another's kids, and local events, though small in scale, provided some much-needed social outlets. However, the lure of the online world remained a persistent and pervasive presence in Leah's life, illustrating the modern struggle between connecting digitally and maintaining real-world relationships in a small-town setting. Leah was a typical girl who loved to sing, dance, play with her siblings, and set up photo shoots. As smartphones and social media became more popular among teenagers, Leah spent many hours online. By the time she was around 13 years old in 2014, she started to actively post a variety of content on her social media pages. She shared everything from details about her personal life and invitations to meet up, to her love for her family and admiration for her mum, who she thought was the best in the world. Sometimes Leah would ask for advice or just share her thoughts online. As she grew up, she experienced the usual emotional ups and downs of moving from childhood to adulthood. There were times when Leah felt unsure or really needed someone to talk to. Although her mom, Lena, and other family members interacted with her posts, Leah often wanted more attention from other social media users. With not much to do in Spring Valley, her interest in boys started to grow, and she used social media like a digital diary, updating her thoughts and activities multiple times a day. Through her posts, anyone could see how she was changing and what she was thinking during her teenage years. She loved her family deeply, but sometimes she felt a deep sense of boredom and looked online for someone to talk to. She openly expressed her feelings of loneliness and her desire for more friends and attention. Social media was just a part of her life, but it revealed her worries and thoughts at that time. Leah was in high school and had recently started dating a boy named Nicholas Nelson. They spent a lot of time together and seemed very happy. Leah didn't really like school much, and in the fall of 2017, she planned to graduate early by passing exams in a special program. She was empathetic and wanted to become a nurse, showing that despite her youth, she had big dreams. On January 23, 2018, the Bradley family celebrated Lena's birthday with a house full of friends and family. The evening was filled with joy, cake, music, and the warmth of loved ones. Little did Lena know, less than a day later, her life would change dramatically. After the party ended at 10 p.m., Leah said goodnight to her mum and went to take a shower. Lena usually got up just before 7 a.m., prepared breakfast, and got the younger kids ready for school, expecting her oldest daughter to be up by then. But that morning, Leah was nowhere to be found. Her bedroom was empty. At first, Lena wasn't too worried, thinking Leah might have gone for her usual morning coffee run to the nearby gas station. However, as the morning progressed without any sign of Leah, Lena's initial calm transformed into concern. She checked Leah's usual spots around the house and even called her cell phone, but there was no answer. Lena's worry deepened when she discovered Leah's phone left behind on her bed. Something highly unusual, as Leah always took her phone with her, especially if she stepped out. Realizing that this was out of the ordinary, Lena decided to call a few of Leah's friends to see if they had heard from her. None of them had seen Leah that morning or the previous night after the party. Lena then reached out to Nicholas, Leah's boyfriend, who also hadn't seen her since the party and was starting to get worried himself. With no clues about her whereabouts, Lena contacted the local police to report her daughter missing. The police arrived and began to gather information, asking about Leah's friends, her online activities, and any recent changes in her behavior. They took note of the digital footprint she left behind, realizing that her social media might provide some clues to her usual hangouts or any new acquaintances. As the search for Leah intensified, the small community of Spring Valley rallied around the Bradley family. Neighbors, classmates, and local volunteers organized search parties, combing through nearby areas and places Leah liked to visit. Flyers with her photo were distributed, and her story quickly spread on social media, leading to a wider community alert. The police, meanwhile, began to delve into the more troubling aspects of Leah's social media presence. They discovered conversations with individuals her family didn't know, revealing a layer of her life that was unknown to even her closest relatives. It became clear that despite the closeness of their family and the vigilance of her brother Kwan, Leah had managed to build relationships online that were invisible to those around her. This revelation led to a dual approach in the investigation, continuing the physical search for Leah while also digging deeper into her online interactions. Investigators worked to trace the digital conversations back to real-world identities, hoping to uncover any leads that might explain her sudden disappearance. As each hour passed, the community's hope mingled with anxiety, and Lena held on to the belief that the strong values she had instilled in her daughter would eventually bring her home safe. Meanwhile, the police worked tirelessly, knowing that the first 48 hours were crucial in missing person cases. Everyone hoped for a breakthrough, aware that every moment mattered in the search for Leah. Had been interacting with individuals who were part of a larger, potentially criminal network. These contacts weren't just casual or romantic, they seemed to be involved in illicit activities that Leah may have unknowingly become tangled up with. Fiona revealed that Leah had mentioned meeting someone new who promised her opportunities that seemed too good to be true. This new information sent shockwaves through the investigation. The police, realizing the potential gravity of the situation, stepped up their efforts. They started to trace Leah's online communications with these questionable contacts, hoping to track down the network and understand the nature of their interactions with her. Simultaneously, community efforts to find Leah continued unabated. The town's residents, together with local businesses, organized a candlelight vigil, hoping for her safe return. Social media campaigns were raped up, with hashtags and shared posts reaching far beyond the local area, catching the attention of regional news outlets. The police managed to track down some of the individuals Leah had communicated with. Through interrogations, they learned that she had been promised a job that required travel, which might explain her sudden and unexplained departure. However, there was no solid proof that she had left willingly or that she was safe. The fear remained that she had been coerced or misled into a dangerous situation. As the search continued, the community held on to hope. Inspired by the strength and resilience of Lena and her family, Lena spent countless hours with the police, providing them with everything they might need to find her daughter. She also spoke at community gatherings, urging young people to be cautious about whom they trust online. The investigation revealed a complex web of interactions that extended beyond simple dating or friendship connections. It became evident that Leah had been drawn into a circle that was much riskier than anyone had suspected. The police focused on tracking down the dark vehicle seen in the video from the coffee stop, which they now believed might be the key to uncovering Leah's whereabouts. Every lead was followed, every piece of surveillance footage reviewed, and every interview conducted with the hope of finding Leah safe and bringing her home. The community, united in their concern and effort, waited anxiously for any news that could lead to her rescue, holding on to hope amidst the fear and uncertainty. As days turned into weeks, the urgency to find Leah did not wane. The community's resolve only strengthened, rallying support from neighboring towns and even states. Flyers became a common sight far beyond Spring Valley, and the story of Leah's disappearance reached a national audience through various social media platforms and news outlets. The breakthrough came when investigators focusing on the dark vehicle managed to enhance the video footage. They identified a distinctive sticker on the back window and a partial license plate. This led them to a small town about 40 miles away from Spring Valley. The vehicle was registered to a man known to have a criminal history, including charges related to cybercrimes and potential trafficking. Armed with this information, law enforcement coordinated a raid on the suspect's residence. The operation was tense, with local and state police involved, prepared for any scenario. As they breached the house, they found several individuals inside, but there was no sign of Leah. However, the search of the premises uncovered a wealth of digital evidence, including computers and mobile devices, loaded with communications and data related to the network Leah had unwittingly become involved with. Meanwhile, the community organized a massive search operation along a possible route Leah might have taken or been taken along. Volunteers, police and drones covered areas of dense woodland and remote fields. During one of these searches, a volunteer found a piece of clothing that was positively identified as belonging to Leah. This discovery narrowed the search area and intensified the efforts. The digital evidence gathered from the raid allowed police to arrest and interrogate several more individuals connected to the suspect. Under pressure, one of the suspects disclosed a location where Leah was supposedly held briefly before being moved. This tip led authorities to an abandoned farmhouse in a secluded area. With hearts racing and hope hanging by a thread, the search team approached the farmhouse. Lena was there, accompanied by family and police, waiting anxiously as officers entered the building. After what felt like an eternity, officers emerged with good news. Leah was found alive. She was weak and frightened, but otherwise unharmed. The reunion with her mother was emotional, captured by police body cameras, showing the relief and tears as Lena embraced her daughter tightly, promising never to let go. In the aftermath, the community celebrated Leah's safe return, but the ordeal had left its mark. Leah had been misled by someone she trusted online, illustrating the dangers lurking behind digital screens. Law enforcement continued to dismantle the network Leah had stumbled into, making several more arrests. Leah's story sparked widespread discussions about internet safety, leading to workshops and educational programs both locally and nationally. For Lena and Leah, the focus was on recovery and advocacy, using their experience to help others recognize the risks of online interactions. The ordeal brought the community closer together, with a renewed commitment to looking out for one another, both in the real world and online. Leah slowly adjusted back to her life, her experience a stark reminder of the fragility of safety in the digital age, but also a testament to the strength and resilience of a community determined to protect its own. There were ads that popped up offering to meet men for money. A high school student named Leah was curious about this business. She found out that some men paid women to meet them. Leah posted ads about herself on adult websites, which led to many messages from men on her phone. Her mom, Lena, felt bad because she didn't expect her daughter to do this. But Leah's brother, Kwan, thought differently. He believed their mom was usually strict, but also gave them freedom. Leah might not have understood the seriousness of meeting strangers for money. She might have thought she'd get paid just for spending time with older men. She was exploring life with the innocence of youth and didn't realize the dangers online. Law enforcement knew that many young people in Spring Valley spent a lot of time online, but their parents didn't understand the risks. So, they asked the FBI for help to track Leah's movements when she disappeared. They found out she was in a vehicle. They looked at surveillance footage but couldn't see license plates clearly. They came up with a plan to use a patrol car with a camera to identify vehicles that pass by frequently. They found a red pickup truck and a black Jeep that stopped appearing suddenly. They focused on these vehicles and found that the black Jeep was linked to a place Leah had been to. At the same time, detectives checked Leah's online activities. They found out she messaged a 26-year-old named Gerald or Jay. He said he stopped talking to her when he found out her true age. This happened on January 24th at 6 a.m. Leah had asked Jay to meet her at an IHOP restaurant, but she quickly took back the invitation, saying it was meant for someone else. Jay responded with a simple smiley face. Then, at 6:40 a.m., Leah sent a distressing message to Jay saying, "I'm dying." When Lena, Leah's mum, found out that Jay was the last person Leah had contacted, she was furious and accused him of harming her daughter. But Jay had an alibi. He said he was at home all night playing video games with a female friend who turned out to be Leah's cousin, Gia. As the investigation continued, the focus shifted back to the black Jeep that was seen in surveillance footage heading towards Putnam County, where Leah's phone signal disappeared. Authorities believed this vehicle was crucial to uncovering Leah's fate. Sadly, the urgency of the situation heightened when 3 days after Leah's disappearance, the sheriff's office in Putnam County received a call reporting the discovery of a young woman's body. A pedestrian had found Leah's remains in a ditch beside a road in Granville Township. The police chief recognized that the young woman matched Leah's description, so he contacted authorities in Spring Valley. Leah's body was found in a rural area covered in snow, with cornfields nearby. Her body showed signs of struggle, indicating she had fought fiercely before her death. When the lead detective arrived at the Bradley family home to deliver the tragic news, Lena sensed something was wrong, even before she was told. DeQuan, Leah's brother, was devastated by the news and fainted upon hearing it. The entire community was shaken by Leah's death, and parents became fearful for their children's safety. The investigation team focused on the black Jeep seen in the surveillance video. They identified the vehicle as a certain model year of a Jeep Wrangler and used databases to find owners in the area. Eventually, they located a black Jeep belonging to Richard Henderson, who had been in Spring Valley on the day of Leah's disappearance. Henderson was seen on gas station surveillance footage near the Bradley residence, waiting for a call from a friend named Leah. As investigators delved deeper into Richard Henderson's background, they noticed inconsistencies in his story and behavior. Despite initially claiming innocence, Henderson's demeanor betrayed moments of hesitation and discomfort under scrutiny. Detectives became increasingly suspicious, especially when Henderson stumbled over details about his supposed friend named Leah. Upon further interrogation, Henderson's facade began to crack. He eventually admitted to having met Leah on the day of her disappearance. He confessed to arranging a meeting with her, intending to engage in illicit activities. However, Henderson insisted that their encounter was consensual and denied any involvement in Leah's death. Despite Henderson's claims, the evidence continued to mount against him. Forensic analysis revealed traces of Leah's DNA in Henderson's vehicle, linking him directly to the crime scene. Additionally, witness testimony and surveillance footage corroborated key aspects of the investigation, further implicating Henderson in Leah's tragic demise. As the case unfolded, the community grappled with shock and disbelief at the horrifying turn of events. Leah's untimely death served as a stark reminder of the dangers lurking in seemingly ordinary interactions, particularly in the realm of online communication. In the aftermath of Leah's murder, law enforcement agencies intensified efforts to combat online exploitation and protect vulnerable individuals, especially minors, from falling prey to predators like Henderson. Community outreach programs and educational initiatives aim to raise awareness about the risks associated with online interactions, empowering individuals to recognize and report suspicious behavior.
Despite the devastating loss of Leah, her memory lived on as a catalyst for positive change, inspiring collective action to prevent similar tragedies from occurring in the future.
Through perseverance and dedication, authorities sought justice for Leah and closure for her grieving loved ones, ensuring that her legacy would endure as a beacon of resilience and hope in the face of adversity. As the investigation unfolded, more details emerged about the tragic events leading to Leah's death. Investigators delved deeper into Richard Henderson's background, uncovering troubling aspects of his past that shed light on his violent tendencies. It was revealed that Henderson had a history of aggression and had been involved in previous altercations, raising concerns about his capacity for violence. Furthermore, Leah's friends and family shared insights into her life, painting a picture of a vibrant and caring young woman whose potential was tragically cut short. They remembered her infectious laughter, her love for animals, and her dreams of pursuing a career in medicine. Leah's untimely death left a void in their lives that could never be filled. As the legal proceedings against Henderson progressed, the community rallied together to seek justice for Leah. Advocates and activists called for stricter laws to protect vulnerable individuals from predators like Henderson and to ensure that no family would have to endure the pain of losing a loved one to senseless violence. Despite the passage of time, the memory of Leah continued to resonate with those who knew her. Her story served as a sobering reminder of the dangers that lurk in the world and the importance of remaining vigilant against threats to our safety and well-being. In the aftermath of Leah's death, her family established a foundation in her name, dedicated to raising awareness about online safety and supporting victims of violence. Through their efforts, they hope to honor Leah's memory and prevent others from suffering a similar fate. As the years went by, Leah's legacy lived on, inspiring positive change and serving as a beacon of hope for a brighter, safer future. Though she may have been taken from this world too soon, Leah's spirit endured, shining brightly in the hearts of those who loved her. We're going to talk about a sad event that happened in Louisiana in 2008. After working all night, Ethan came home to find his 24-year-old wife, Nora, lying on the floor and not breathing. When the police got there, it looked like a robbery that had gone wrong. But soon, they realized it was something much darker. Nora was born to John and Ava in Laurel, Mississippi, on November 27, 1983. She was the youngest child and had two older brothers. In 1991, her family moved to Arbutus Springs, Louisiana, where they built their church. Nora got involved in the church early on, helping out and going on many trips around the world with Christian groups to help people, especially kids. She was always looking forward to having a family of her own. Nora was homeschooled and studied Christian education online at North Tennessee Bible Institute. She loved helping people and dreamed of having her own family one day. Nora was very committed to her beliefs, saving herself for marriage and dating only with the serious intention of getting married. She had a lot of friends, including Ethan, who was also a youth John and very well liked. Nora and Ethan had known each other for a long time through church, and their families were close. After years of friendship, Ethan asked her father for permission to marry her, and he happily agreed. Before their wedding, Nora and Ethan followed church rules and didn't have any physical contact. Nora even wanted their first kiss to be at the altar. While Nora helped at the church, Ethan was studying to be a paramedic. They got married on March 1, 2008, in a beautiful ceremony attended by their church community and family. It was a dream come true for Nora, but tragically, just 4 months later, on June 29, 2008, at around 6 a.m., Ethan came home from his night shift and found Nora dead on the floor. This tragic discovery marked the beginning of a painful period for both families and their community. Initially, the scene indicated a simple break-in gone terribly wrong. The house was in disarray, items were missing, and there was no immediate sign of what had specifically caused Nora's death. The community was shocked, and everyone rallied around Ethan and both families, offering support and trying to make sense of the senseless. As the police delved deeper into the investigation, however, they began to find inconsistencies that suggested the robbery might have been staged. The way some items were scattered seemed too deliberate, and some of Nora's valuables were left untouched. The detectives started to suspect that the crime scene had been manipulated to mislead them. This turn in the investigation led the police to consider other motives and potential suspects beyond random burglars. They started to re-examine everyone close to Nora, including Ethan. Friends and acquaintances were interviewed, alibis were checked, and the couple's background was scrutinized. The police learned from friends and family that the couple appeared happy and in love, which made the situation even more confusing. The community, which had been so supportive, began to feel the strain of suspicion and uncertainty. Rumors started to circulate, and the initial unity began to crack under the pressure and fear of not knowing. The church community held prayer vigils and tried to stay positive, hoping for quick answers to bring peace back to their lives. As the investigation continued, forensic analysts worked on the evidence collected from the scene. They found that some of the supposed robbery signs were inconsistent with genuine burglary patterns. This led them to believe that whoever staged the robbery knew Nora personally. The turning point in the investigation came when the autopsy report was released, revealing more about Nora's cause of death and the timeline of her final hours. The report indicated signs of struggle that weren't initially apparent, suggesting that Nora might have known her attacker and tried to defend herself. This revelation forced everyone to consider the painful possibility that someone within their tight-knit circle might be responsible for Nora's death. The community, while still reeling from the shock, awaited justice for Nora, clinging to their faith and each other for support through the difficult times ahead. Who could have wanted to hurt them? Ethan was in deep grief, struggling with the loss of not only his beloved wife but also their unborn child, whom they were both eagerly anticipating. The police, keeping all possibilities open, continued their investigation. They started by checking Ethan's alibi, which was confirmed by his colleagues at the ambulance service. They verified that he was indeed at work during the time Nora was believed to have been killed. Meanwhile, detectives began to canvass the neighborhood, looking for any witnesses or unusual activity reported around the time of the murder. They also examined local security camera footage to see if it could offer any clues. The police hoped these efforts might lead to a breakthrough in understanding who had access to the house and the motive behind the break-in and tragic murder. As the investigation progressed, forensic experts analyzed the 9mm shell casing and bullet retrieved from the scene to try and match it with other firearms data. They also took fingerprints and DNA samples from around the house, especially from the areas where the intruder seemed to have searched. The community was in shock over the violent crime, especially since Nora was known to be a kind and loving person involved in many charitable activities. The fact that she was pregnant added an extra layer of tragedy to the situation. The church held memorial services, and the community gathered to support Ethan and both families, holding on to hope that justice would soon be served. Detectives also delved into possible enemies or anyone who might bear a grudge against the couple, though nothing significant surfaced. They questioned friends, family, and acquaintances about any recent strange behaviors or conflicts involving Nora or Ethan. As time passed, the case gathered extensive attention from the media, putting additional pressure on the police to solve the mystery. Everyone hoped for a breakthrough, not only to bring justice for Nora and her unborn child, but also to restore a sense of safety and peace to the shaken community. As the investigation continued, the police focused on the details of the break-in. They revisited the scene, examining the broken gun cabinet and the scattered contents of Nora's purse more closely. Their aim was to determine if the robbery was genuine or a cover-up for the murder. The detectives wondered if the killer had intentionally staged the scene to divert attention from a more personal motive. Meanwhile, the community rallied around Ethan, providing him with support during this incredibly tough time. His colleagues at the ambulance service also vouched for his character and were shocked that he could be connected to such a tragedy. The investigators expanded their search for clues beyond the immediate area. They followed up on tips from the public and sifted through piles of data, including phone records and financial statements of the couple, hoping to uncover any hidden relationships or motives. They also revisited interviews with Nora's friends and acquaintances, probing for any information about potential conflicts or recent changes in her life that could point to a suspect. One particular angle they explored was the missing firearms. The fact that specific items such as a rifle and a shotgun were taken from the gun cabinet, despite other valuables being left behind, suggested that the perpetrator might have familiarity with the couple's home and knew exactly what to look for. This led detectives to consider the possibility of an acquaintance being involved. At the same time, forensic experts continued their work. DNA samples collected from the scene were analyzed and cross-referenced with national databases, but no matches were found initially. The bullet and shell casing were also tested, but without other firearms to compare them to, results were inconclusive. As weeks turned into months, the case started to grow cold, with few new leads emerging. The lack of conclusive evidence and a direct suspect began to weigh heavily on everyone involved. The police held several press conferences, appealing to the public for any information that might lead to a breakthrough. Ethan, devastated and desperate for answers, cooperated fully with the investigation. He participated in community events to keep Nora's memory alive and worked closely with law enforcement, hoping for any progress. His visible grief and consistent cooperation with the police helped to quell some of the initial suspicions about him. In a renewed effort to solve the case, the police decided to re-interview everyone close to Nora, including distant relatives and anyone who had interacted with the couple in the months leading up to her murder. They also employed new technologies to re-examine digital footprints and communications that could have been overlooked. As the anniversary of Nora's death approached, the community planned a vigil, not only to honor her memory, but also to reignite public interest in the case. The police hoped that this event might encourage someone with withheld information to come forward, finally bringing justice for Nora and her unborn child and giving peace to a community shaken by tragedy. On Sunday, June 29, 2008, to find Nora already dead. He maintained his innocence, reiterating that he had been at work the entire night and had multiple colleagues who could confirm his presence. However, the discovery of the 9mm shell casings in his backyard, identical to the one found near Nora's body, raised serious questions about his story. The police pressed Ethan for more details about the gun. Reluctantly, Ethan admitted that he did own a 9mm handgun, which he claimed had been stolen earlier, but had not reported missing because he didn't think it was significant. This new information led the investigators to re-examine Ethan's alibi more critically. They contacted his workplace to verify his hours and spoke with his colleagues again. While his presence at work was confirmed, the timings he provided gave him enough of a window to potentially commit the crime, considering the travel time to and from his home. The police also reviewed security footage from cameras near Ethan and Nora's home and along the route between their house and Ethan's workplace. They hoped to capture any evidence of him returning home earlier than he claimed. Further analysis at the State Crime Lab confirmed that the bullets from the casings found in the backyard and the bullet recovered from Nora's head were fired from the same gun. This crucial piece of evidence was hard for Ethan to explain away. Faced with mounting evidence, the detectives also started looking into Ethan's background and financials more thoroughly. They discovered that although outwardly happy, Ethan had significant debts that Nora was not aware of. Detectives speculated whether financial stress might have motivated him to stage a robbery gone wrong as a cover-up for murder. As the investigation deepened, law enforcement brought in a forensic psychologist to analyze Ethan's behavior and any potential psychological motives. This analysis aimed to understand the dynamics of Ethan and Nora's relationship better and whether there were any hidden stresses or conflicts. With the case gathering evidence pointing increasingly towards Ethan, the police prepared to bring him in for a more intensive round of questioning. They hoped this would finally lead to a confession, or at least some slip-up that could conclusively tie him to the murder of his wife. The community, shocked by the turn of events and the growing suspicion around Ethan, awaited justice for Nora. The church held prayer meetings, and Nora's family, devastated by the revelations, hoped for closure. As the legal proceedings began to take shape, everyone braced for what might be a painful and revealing trial. He admitted that the tale about selling the gun to a man named Steve was fabricated. He had never sold the gun. It had always been in his possession. Ethan broke down and confessed that he and Nora had been arguing intensely about their finances and his suspected infidelity. He claimed that the shooting was an accident that occurred during a heated argument when he had impulsively grabbed the gun, intending to scare her but not to shoot. The confession changed the direction of the investigation. The police now focused on verifying the details of Ethan's admission. They examined the couple's financial records, text messages, and emails to understand the context of their arguments and the nature of their relationship. Additionally, the forensic team revisited the crime scene to align the physical evidence with Ethan's new account of events. The police also reached out to the colleague Ethan was allegedly involved with to corroborate the timeline and the nature of their relationship. This colleague was interviewed to determine if there was any corroborative evidence that supported Ethan's confession about the circumstances leading up to the shooting. Meanwhile, the district attorney started preparing charges against Ethan based on his confession and the accumulated evidence. The charges would likely include manslaughter due to his claim that the shooting was accidental, alongside other potential charges related to his initial misleading statements and the handling of the firearm. Nora's family, devastated by the turn of events, sought legal counsel to represent their interests and ensure that justice was served for Nora and her unborn child. They also began to organize a memorial service to honor her memory, inviting members of their church and community who had supported them through this tragic time. The community reacted with a mix of shock and relief that the case was seemingly resolved, though the circumstances were heartbreaking. Many expressed their condolences to Nora's family and shared their own memories of her kindness and vibrant personality. As the legal proceedings began, the focus shifted to the court where the evidence would be presented, and Ethan would have the opportunity to formally respond to the charges laid against him. The upcoming trial promised to be a painful but necessary process to uncover the full truth of what happened to Nora Alexander. As the trial approached, the community and media attention intensified. The small town was abuzz with discussions about the case, often divided between those who couldn't believe Ethan, a once respected youth John an EMT, could be capable of such an act, and those outraged by the betrayal and violence against Nora and their unborn child. In preparation for the trial, Ethan's defense team argued that the shooting was indeed an accident, bolstered by his emotional instability and the couple's intense argument at the time. They planned to present evidence of Ethan's previous good character and his contributions to the community and church. They also intended to bring up the stress he was under due to financial strain and the pregnancy, Ethan framing the shooting as a tragic lapse in judgment rather than a premeditated act. The prosecution, on the other hand, prepared a strong case against Ethan, emphasizing the inconsistencies in his stories and his motives stemming from marital discord and financial pressures. They highlighted the forensic evidence that matched the shell casings found at the crime scene to those near the pond, disproving his initial claims about the gun's whereabouts. Additionally, they aimed to show that the staged burglary was an attempt by Ethan to cover up his crime, further demonstrating his guilt. As the trial began, testimonies from Nora's friends and family painted a picture of her life and the couple's relationship. They described Nora as a devoted wife and expectant mother, deeply involved in her church and excited about her future. In contrast, witnesses recounted instances where Ethan appeared distant or agitated, corroborating the theory that he was unhappy in the marriage. Forensic experts testified about the gunshot residue, the angle of the shot, and the absence of signs of forced entry or a real burglary at the home. They explained how the evidence suggested a close-range shooting, likely with familiarity and intent, countering the defense's narrative of an accidental shooting. Ethan took the stand in his own defense, expressing remorse and insisting that he never intended to kill Nora. His testimony was emotional as he recounted the events leading up to the incident. He claimed the gun went off accidentally during a struggle, a claim the prosecution challenged by questioning the lack of defensive wounds on Nora's body, which would be expected in a struggle. The community watched closely as the jury deliberated. After several days of intense discussion, the jury returned with a verdict. Ethan was found guilty of manslaughter and tampering with evidence. The courtroom was filled with mixed emotions, with Nora's family feeling a sense of justice, though tempered by the irreversible loss of Nora and her unborn child. Following the verdict, the judge sentenced Ethan to a lengthy prison term, emphasizing the tragic and preventable nature of the crime. Outside the courthouse, media crews interviewed various committee members and legal experts who dissected the trial's outcome and its implications for domestic violence awareness. In the aftermath, Nora's family worked to establish a foundation in her memory, focused on supporting victims of domestic violence and promoting healthy relationships, hoping to prevent similar tragedies from occurring. The case left a lasting impact on the town, a somber reminder of the hidden struggles that can lie beneath the surface of seemingly happy relationships. Ethan told a story, but was it true? He said that he fell asleep before his shift at work. He slept on the sofa and was late because his wife didn't wake him up on time. He wasn't upset with her though. He said it wasn't a problem. Before work, he walked around the house with a gun. He was planning to take it to work because a co-worker might want to buy it. While pretending to shoot, he pointed it at things and made click-click sounds. Just playing around. He sneaked up behind his wife, Nora, put the gun to her head, and accidentally fired it. He insisted it was an accident and that he didn't mean to hurt her. After realizing she was dead, he panicked and didn't know what to do. So, he tried to make it look like a robbery had happened. He took some items, including weapons and a DVD player, and left for work with the front door open, hoping someone would notice and call the police. His plan didn't work. On his way to work, he threw out the gun and some of Nora's jewelry from his car. When he got to work, all he had left was the DVD player and a Sony radio. He gave the DVD player to a coworker named Carter. He also admitted he was having an affair with her. The police talked to Carter, and she said she and Ethan had kissed and held hands, even once spending a night together at a hotel in Baton Rouge. Ethan took her there to relax, paid for a fancy room, and even brought dishes and wine from his house. At that time, Nora was at a church camp. Ethan thought Nora wouldn't find out about the affair. He admitted to having money troubles too. He was only making $11 an hour and struggling to pass a test that could help him earn more. Their washing machine was broken, Nora didn't have health insurance, and she didn't have a job. They were renting their home. Despite these financial problems, he still spent money on a hotel night with Carter. Carter told the police she had no idea Ethan had done anything to his wife. The detectives confirmed Carter was not involved in the crime. The detectives delved deeper into the situation. They found out that Carter had no connection to Nora's death. Alexander's financial struggles were a significant part of the story. He explained that despite the tough times, he managed to scrape together money for his affair with Carter at the Callaway Inn. Nora, on the other hand, faced her own set of challenges. Without health insurance and unemployed, she was in a tough spot. Their rental home and broken washing machine added to their stress. As Alexander's story unfolded, it became evident that the situation was complex. His affair with Carter, financial troubles, and the accidental shooting of his wife created a tangled web of events. Despite Alexander's attempts to cover up the accident, the truth was slowly coming to light. The detectives had their work cut out for them as they pieced together the sequence of events leading up to Nora's tragic death. After Ethan admitted his involvement in Nora's death, investigators doubted it was an accident. They found it suspicious that he was playing around with a gun in the house, especially aiming it at his pregnant wife. The next step was to find the weapon, and they discovered it exactly where Ethan claimed to have thrown it. Ballistics tests confirmed it was the same gun used in Nora's death. Consequently, Ethan faced serious charges: second-degree murder for killing his wife, first-degree fetid for the death of their unborn child, and obstruction of justice for staging a fake robbery scene. Investigators believed Ethan wanted to end his marriage to be with his mistress, and his wife's pregnancy complicated matters. They thought he made a deliberate choice to get rid of his wife and unborn child. Despite the tragedy, Nora's parents found it in their hearts to forgive Ethan. They mourned their daughter and grandchild, but chose to forgive him. Nora was remembered fondly by her friends and family for her charitable work. The trial began, and prosecutors argued that Ethan's actions after the incident showed intent. They questioned why he didn't call for help immediately and instead staged the scene to make it look like a robbery. Ethan's defense acknowledged his mistakes but maintained it was not premeditated. Ultimately, Ethan pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and received a 55-year prison sentence. The plea deal was reached with the agreement of the victim's family, bringing some closure to the tragic case. In March 2020, something terrible happened in a small Ohio community. Brenda Powell, who was 50 years old, was tragically murdered by her own daughter. Her daughter, Sydney Powell, was just 19 years old at the time. Sydney was in her second year at Mount Union University. People in the neighborhood thought the Powell family was happy and normal. Brenda and her husband Steve cared a lot about Sydney and her younger brother Andrew. Sydney and Brenda were especially close, which made it hard for people to understand why Sydney would do something so awful. Just 2 years before the tragedy, Sydney was doing really well in high school. She did great in her classes and was also the captain of the soccer team. Because of her hard work, she got a scholarship to go to Mount Union. When Sydney moved to college in 2018, she seemed excited and ready for the future. But everything changed one day. Brenda was talking on the phone with Sydney's college about her grades when something terrible happened. Sydney attacked her own mother, using things from the kitchen as weapons. It was a shocking and violent act that ended Brenda's life. Afterwards, Sydney said she wasn't in the right state of mind and didn't know what she was doing. But the people who prosecuted her said that wasn't true. They said Sydney was responsible for what she did. In the days following the tragic event, the Powell family's once bright future turned into a dark cloud of sorrow and confusion. Neighbors who had known the family for years couldn't believe what had happened. They remembered seeing Brenda and Sydney together, laughing and chatting as they went about their daily routines. Now, the image of their happy family was shattered, replaced by the grim reality of Brenda's untimely death and Sydney's involvement. As the details of the incident emerged, so did the questions. How could a loving daughter commit such a violent act against her own mother? What could have driven Sydney to such extreme measures? Friends and acquaintances searched their memories for signs of trouble, but for many, Sydney's actions seemed completely out of character. The legal proceedings that followed only added to the community's sense of disbelief. Sydney's defense team argued that she was not in her right mind at the time of the attack, citing temporary insanity and delusions. However, prosecutors countered that Sydney's actions were premeditated and deliberate, pointing to evidence of mounting tension and frustration in the Powell household. As the case unfolded in court, emotions ran high. Brenda's family and friends struggled to come to terms with their loss, while Sydney's loved ones grappled with conflicting feelings of shock, disbelief, and loyalty. In the end, the tragedy served as a stark reminder of the fragility of life and the complexities of the human mind. Sydney's actions during the horrific crime showed that she was aware of what she was doing. This left everyone, her family, friends, and the larger community, deeply shocked and grappling with the senseless loss of Brenda Powell. People wondered if Sydney was truly disconnected from reality when she attacked her mother. The crime shook the entire neighborhood, and new shocking details emerged as police investigated. Detectives were still trying to understand why Sydney would do such a thing. When Sydney first arrived at Mount Union University in August 2018, she was excited to start college. Her freshman year went smoothly as she lived in a dorm with her high school friend Lauren Curry. They even joined a sorority together, which helped Sydney make more friends and enjoy college life. Sydney seemed capable of handling her classes, though she sometimes worried about her schoolwork. When she came home for winter break, she was happy and full of stories about her experiences at college. Her parents hoped Sydney would continue to thrive in college. They were proud of the confident young woman she was becoming. However, things took a turn during her second year at Mount Union. Sydney began to struggle with her classes and missed assignments. She didn't seem as interested in her schoolwork as she was in socializing. By the end of her sophomore year, her grades were so low that she was put on academic probation. This meant she had to improve her grades, or she could face serious consequences. As Sydney's second year at Mount Union progressed, her academic struggles became more apparent. Despite the support of her family and friends, she found it increasingly difficult to keep up with her coursework. While she once excelled both socially and academically, Sydney's focus seemed to shift more towards the social aspects of college life rather than her studies. Her parents, Steve and Brenda, noticed the change in Sydney's behavior during her visits home. They tried to offer encouragement and support, but they couldn't shake the growing concern they felt for their daughter's academic performance. In court, people were really upset as they learned about what happened. Brenda's family and friends were heartbroken about losing her. Sydney's loved ones felt shocked and couldn't believe what had happened. They also felt loyal to Sydney, even though they were surprised by her actions. The whole sad situation made everyone think about how life can be fragile and how people's minds can be complicated. Sydney seemed to know what she was doing when the crime happened, which surprised everyone. Her family, friends, and the community wondered if she understood what was happening when she heard her mother. The crime made the whole neighborhood feel shaken up. As the police looked into what happened, they found out more surprising details. They were still trying to understand why Sydney did what she did. When Sydney started college at Mount Union University in 2018, she was really happy and excited. She lived in a dorm with her friend Lauren and joined a sorority, which helped her make more friends and enjoy college life. At first, Sydney did well in her classes, although she sometimes worried about them. When she came home for winter break, she had lots of stories to share about her college experiences. Her parents were hopeful that Sydney would keep doing well in college. They were proud of how confident she was becoming. But during her second year, things started to change. Sydney began having trouble with her classes and missing assignments. She seemed more interested in hanging out with friends than focusing on her studies. By the end of her sophomore year, her grades were so low that she was put on academic probation. This meant she had to improve her grades or face serious consequences. As Sydney's second year went on, her struggles with school became more obvious. Even though her family and friends tried to help her, she found it harder to keep up with her classes. Before, she used to do well both socially and academically, but now she was more focused on making friends than on studying. Her parents, Steve and Brenda, noticed these changes when Sydney visited home. They tried to encourage and support her, but they were worried about her grades and her well-being. Meanwhile, Sydney's relationship with her mother, Brenda, remained close. They continued to share a strong bond, despite Sydney's increasing challenges at school. Brenda tried to help Sydney navigate her academic difficulties, offering guidance and encouragement along the way. However, tensions began to rise as Sydney's grades continued to slip. The pressure of academic probation weighed heavily on her, adding to her already mounting stress and anxiety. As Sydney struggled to meet the expectations placed upon her, she found herself increasingly overwhelmed. The once bright future that lay ahead now seemed uncertain, overshadowed by the fear of failure and disappointment. Despite their efforts to support her, Sydney's parents couldn't shake the feeling of helplessness as they watched their daughter struggle. They desperately hoped she would find a way to overcome her challenges and rediscover the confidence and determination that had once defined her. But as the days passed, their worries only grew, leaving them to wonder what the future held for their beloved daughter. Instead of informing her parents about her probation status and the jeopardy of her scholarship, Sydney kept it a secret. In January 2020, she went back to Mount Union as if nothing had changed. Unfortunately, her grades didn't improve that semester, and she was eventually suspended from the university. Despite this, Sydney pretended to still be a student. She moved out of her dorm and stayed in nearby hotels, using money her dad thought was for her tuition. To her friends, Sydney seemed excited about the new semester and acted like a regular college student. She managed to keep her secret for a while, but eventually Mount Union administrators confronted her in February. They reminded her that as a suspended student, she wasn't allowed on campus. Sydney claimed her parents were struggling, so she needed more time to leave. The administration initially agreed, but later had to intervene when Sydney didn't comply. On February 24th, security had to step in and forbid Sydney from staying on campus any longer. Finally facing the reality of losing her scholarship and student status, Sydney had nowhere to hide. Her elaborate charade had been exposed, and she was forced to confront the consequences of her actions. After years of high achievement, Sydney suddenly found herself at risk of failure, both in her own eyes and in the eyes of her family. The pressure mounted, setting the stage for an emotional eruption. During the investigation, it was revealed through transcripts that Sydney had not enrolled in classes for the spring semester, further confirming the extent of her deception. Meetings with university officials ensued, leading to Sydney being confronted about her continued presence on campus despite her suspended status. Following Sydney's confrontation with university officials, the realization of her predicament began to sink in. The weight of her deception and the looming consequences pressed heavily upon her. She had built her identity around academic success and the facade of being a model student, and now it was all unraveling before her eyes. As she grappled with the impending loss of her scholarship and student status, Sydney faced a profound internal struggle. The expectations of her family, the disappointment she felt in herself, and the fear of what the future held weighed heavily on her mind. She had worked so hard to maintain the illusion of perfection, only to find herself exposed and vulnerable. In the days that followed, Sydney retreated into a state of isolation, wrestling with feelings of shame, regret, and uncertainty. The once vibrant and confident young woman now found herself adrift in a sea of doubt and self-recrimination. Her parents, too, were left reeling from the revelation of Sydney's deceit. They grappled with feelings of betrayal and confusion, struggling to reconcile the image of their daughter as a diligent student with the reality of her actions. As the dust settled and the shock began to wear off, Sydney was left to confront the harsh reality of her situation. She had lost her footing on the path she had worked so hard to follow, and now she faced the daunting task of rebuilding her life from the ground up. But whether she could find the strength and resilience to rise from the ashes of her deception remained to be seen. As Sydney's troubles continued to escalate, her father, Steve, stumbled upon the truth in a shocking manner. On March 3, 2020, while attempting to access Sydney's university account, he discovered that she was no longer enrolled. Concerned, he checked her location through the family app and realized she was at their Akron home when she should have been on campus. Alarmed, Steve promptly left work and rushed home. When Steve arrived, he found Sydney at home and demanded an explanation. Sydney, cornered and with nowhere left to hide, finally confessed everything to her father. She admitted to failing classes and being told to leave campus weeks earlier. Steve, caught off guard by this revelation, suggested calling Brenda, Sydney's mother, to discuss the situation further. Meanwhile, Brenda, unaware of the unfolding drama, was making her way home to speak to Sydney. She called the university to clarify Sydney's standing, and University Dean John Fraser fielded the call, with Associate Dean Michelle Gaffney listening in. As they initiated the difficult conversation, they suddenly heard a blood-curdling scream and sounds of a struggle coming from Brenda's end of the line. Startled, Dean Fraser repeatedly called out Brenda's name, but there was no response. Instead, they heard thuds and screams, indicating a violent altercation. The situation was escalating rapidly, and both Dean Fraser and Michelle Gaffney were gripped with shock and concern as they listened helplessly from the other end of the line. As the chaos unfolded over the phone, Dean Fraser and Michelle Gaffney were gripped with panic and confusion. The suddenness and intensity of the situation left them stunned, unsure of what to do next. They could hear the sounds of struggle and desperation emanating from Brenda's end of the line, each thud and scream amplifying their sense of helplessness. Despite their shock, Dean Fraser tried desperately to get Brenda's attention, calling out her name in a futile attempt to intervene from afar. Meanwhile, Michelle Gaffney listened in horror as the situation escalated, her mind racing with fear and uncertainty. In a matter of moments, what had begun as a routine phone call had transformed into a scene of unimaginable horror. The once calm and composed conversation had descended into chaos, leaving Dean Fraser and Michelle Gaff reeling from the suddenness and brutality of it all. As the sounds of the struggle continued, Dean Fraser and Michelle Gaffney remained frozen in shock, their minds racing with fear and confusion. They could only listen helplessly as the situation unfolded, their hearts heavy with the knowledge that they were powerless to stop it. As Michelle Gaff and Dean Fraser attempted to make sense of the chaos, they immediately contacted the authorities, and soon, police descended upon the Powell household. What they found inside was a scene of unimaginable horror. Sydney Powell stood in the living room, covered in blood and seemingly disconnected from reality. She alternated between hysterical crying and eerie moments of silence as officers tried to calm her erratic behavior. Meanwhile, other officers searched the house and made a grim discovery in the master bedroom. There, they found Brenda Powell's lifeless body, surrounded by signs of a brutal struggle. She had suffered over 20 stab wounds and blunt force trauma to her head. Nearby lay a cast iron skillet and a large kitchen knife, both stained with blood and hair. When Sydney was finally able to speak coherently, she claimed that an intruder had broken into the house and attacked her mother. According to her account, Brenda had told Sydney to run and hide while she fought off the assailant. Sydney claimed she emerged from hiding to find her mother fatally wounded. However, the evidence painted a different picture. Despite Sydney's claims, several inconsistencies in her story and physical evidence suggested that she was the actual perpetrator of the crime. The presence of the murder weapons, the lack of forced entry, and Sydney's own behavior all pointed to her involvement in her mother's death. As investigators pieced together the evidence, it became increasingly clear that Sydney's version of events was a fabrication designed to cover up her own actions. What had begun as a routine investigation had quickly turned into a complex and tragic case of deception and betrayal. The investigation into Brenda Powell's murder revealed compelling evidence contradicting Sydney's initial claims of an intruder's attack. Firstly, the supposedly broken window, alleged entry point for the intruder, had blood smears on the outside, suggesting it was broken from the inside, likely by Sydney after the attack. Moreover, Sydney bore visible wounds on her hands and arms consistent with those sustained during a violent assault, undermining her narrative of being an innocent bystander. Additionally, Sydney's assertion that Brenda had instructed her to flee seemed implausible given the extreme nature of Brenda's injuries. The over 20 stab wounds indicated a deeply personal and emotionally charged attack, incompatible with the notion of a random intruder. With mounting evidence pointing to Sydney's culpability, she was arrested in April 2020 and charged with her mother's murder. However, she was released on bail shortly thereafter, only to stand trial in September 2023. Throughout the trial, Sydney's defense team pursued a not guilty plea, citing temporary insanity induced by schizophrenia. They argued that Sydney's psychotic breakdown rendered her unable to comprehend the consequences of her actions. However, the prosecution countered, asserting that Sydney was fully aware of her choices before, during, and after the crime. They highlighted Sydney's attempts to stage the scene and conceal her involvement as evidence of her guilt. After a 12-day trial and extensive witness testimony, the jury ultimately sided with the prosecution, finding Sydney guilty on all charges related to her mother's murder. On September 20th, 2023, Sydney was sentenced to an indefinite term of 15 years to life in prison, ensuring she would remain incarcerated until at least age 38 before becoming eligible for parole. The judge upheld the jury's decision, citing the violent nature of the offenses and Sydney's refusal to accept responsibility. The outcome brought little solace to those devastated by Brenda's death as they grappled with the incomprehensible violence perpetrated by Sydney, once a model teenager. Brenda's family, friends, and the local community mourned her loss, struggling to reconcile the tragic outcome with the happy memories of the Powell family they once knew. The sentencing marked the end of a tumultuous legal battle, but it also left lingering questions and wounds in its wake. For Brenda's loved ones, the pain of her loss remained raw, compounded by the shock of her daughter's actions. They struggled to reconcile the image of Sydney as a once promising young woman with the reality of her involvement in such a heinous crime. The ripple effects of Brenda's murder extended far beyond her immediate family. The small Ohio community where the Powell resided was shaken to its core by the tragedy. Back in July 2007, this is a tale of jealousy, manipulation, and a surprising twist that caught everyone off guard. Laura Wilkie, aged 35, was a journalist with a strong determination to uncover corruption. She ran a blog called Ocala After Dark, where she fearlessly investigated local crime stories and political figures. Laura was known for her sharp mind and contagious laughter, which drew people to her. In her free time, she enjoyed painting landscapes and exploring the city's hidden treasures. During the hot summer of July 2007, Ocala was bustling with activity due to the city's annual music festival, Ocala Jam Fest. Laura, always on the hunt for an interesting story, attended the festival to capture its vibrant atmosphere and interview bands, both new and established. Her blog post about the event gained attention from music fans and fellow journalists. But Laura's true passion was exposing the darker side of the city. She delved into the lives of local politicians, uncovering scandals and shining a light on their questionable actions. Her investigative pieces, such as revealing the mayor's secrets and exposing the dark side of Ocala's elite, became the talk of the town. The local newspaper, Ocala Gazette, even featured her work on the front page, praising her relentless pursuit of truth. However, Laura's determination came with risks. She received anonymous threats and warnings to stay away from certain individuals. But she remained undeterred, believing that the truth needed to be brought to light. Her latest investigation focused on a prominent car dealership owner, Jonathan Range Rover Reed, who was rumored to have ties to organized crime. Laura dug into his background, uncovering suspicious transactions and connections that led her into the dangerous underworld. Little did Laura know, her relentless pursuit of justice would have serious consequences on a sweltering July afternoon. As Laura continued her investigation into Jonathan Range Rover Reed and his alleged ties to organized crime, she became increasingly immersed in a web of deceit and danger. Despite the warnings and threats she received, Laura was furled by her unwavering commitment to uncovering the truth. She spent countless hours poring over documents, following leads, and conducting interviews, determined to expose any wrongdoing. Her relentless pursuit took her to the shadowy corners of Ocala, where she encountered individuals who would stop at nothing to protect their secrets. With each piece of evidence she uncovered, Laura's sense of urgency grew. She knew that her findings had the potential to shake the foundations of the city's power structures and bring about real change, but she also understood the risks involved. As the summer heat intensified, so did the tension surrounding Laura's investigation. Suspicion hung in the air, and Laura found herself constantly looking over her shoulder, unsure of who she could trust. Then, one fateful July afternoon, as the sun beat down mercilessly on the streets of Ocala, Laura made a shocking discovery that would change everything. But before she could act on it, tragedy struck, sending shockwaves through the community and leaving everyone wondering what had truly happened to Laura Wilkie. The events that unfolded that day would reveal the dark underbelly of Ocala's power dynamics and serve as a stark reminder of the dangers that lurk beneath the surface of even the most seemingly idyllic communities. And as the investigation into Laura's death began, it became clear that the truth was more elusive and more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. As news of Laura's tragic demise spread throughout Ocala, the community was plunged into a state of shock and disbelief. Friends, family, and followers of her work on Ocala After Dark were left reeling, struggling to come to terms with the loss of someone who had been such a vibrant and fearless presence in their lives. The authorities launched a thorough investigation into Laura's death, but the circumstances surrounding it were murky and complex. Rumors swirled, fueled by speculation and fear. Some whispered that Laura had stumbled upon information so damning that powerful forces had silenced her to protect their interests. Others speculated that her death was simply a tragic accident, the result of a series of unfortunate events. As the investigation unfolded, detectives combed through Laura's recent activities, scrutinizing her interactions and delving into her ongoing investigations. They interviewed witnesses, analyzed evidence, and retraced her steps in the days leading up to her death, searching for any clues that might shed light on what had happened. Meanwhile, Laura's colleagues and fellow journalists rallied together, determined to continue her work and honor her memory. They pored over her notes and unfinished stories, vowing to carry on her mission of exposing corruption and holding those in power accountable. But as they delved deeper into Laura's investigations, they soon realized that they were treading on dangerous ground. The same forces that had silenced Laura now seemed intent on silencing anyone who dared to follow in her footsteps. Threats and intimidation tactics were deployed, leaving many feeling afraid and uncertain. Despite the risks, Laura's colleagues pressed on, driven by a shared sense of duty and a desire to seek justice for their fallen friend. With each new revelation, they moved one step closer to uncovering the truth behind Laura's death and the dark forces that had conspired to silence her. As the days turned into weeks and the investigation continued, one thing became clear: the legacy of Laura Wilkie would not be forgotten. Her courage, determination, and unwavering commitment to truth and justice would live on, inspiring others to carry on her fight and ensure that her death was not in vain. And as the sun set on another sweltering July evening in Ocala, the quest for answers continued, fueled by a determination to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Laura received a tip about a secret meeting between Reed and a corrupt city council member. Determined to capture evidence, she set up surveillance near a local coffee shop called Brood Awakening. As she discreetly snapped photographs, she had no idea that someone was poisoning her. Eventually, this left her bedridden and finally dead on the scorching morning of July 12, 2007. Tragedy struck the quiet city of Ocala, Florida, precisely at 9 a.m. Jay Wilkie, Laura Wilkie's husband, made a horrifying discovery that would change his life forever. The day had started like any other in the Wilkie household, with the sun beating down mercilessly on the small suburban neighborhood as residents sought refuge in the coolness of their air-conditioned homes. But little did Jay know that this day would mark the beginning of a dark and perplexing chapter in his life. As Jay entered the bedroom, he was met with a sight that would haunt him for the rest of his days. There, lying motionless on the neatly made bed, was Laura, his beloved wife. Her once vibrant eyes were now closed forever, and her body lay still as if frozen in time. The room was filled with an eerie silence, broken only by Jay's gasp of disbelief. The authorities were immediately summoned to the scene, their sirens piercing the otherwise tranquil neighborhood as they meticulously combed through the room, searching for any clues that could shed light on this mysterious death. The air was thick with tension and uncertainty. In the days following Laura's untimely demise, the media frenzy surrounding the case reached a fever pitch. Headlines screamed with speculation, and armchair detectives dissected every detail, desperately trying to piece together the puzzle. News outlets like the Ocala Gazette and the Florida Times-Union dedicated countless column inches to the investigation as the city held its breath, waiting for answers. As the investigation continued, the city of Ocala held its breath, anxiously awaiting the day when the truth behind Laura's death would finally be unveiled. But for now, the answers remained elusive, shrouded in a web of secrecy and unanswered questions. In the heart of Ocala, a city known for its picturesque landscapes and vibrant community, a shocking crime took place that would leave the town in a state of shock and mourning. In the aftermath of Laura's death, the community of Ocala was gripped by a sense of disbelief and fear. The once vibrant city now felt like a shadow of its former self, as whispers of conspiracy and betrayal echoed through the streets. Jay Wilkie, Laura's husband, found himself thrust into the spotlight, his grief compounded by the overwhelming attention from the media and the relentless scrutiny of the public eye. Struggling to come to terms with his loss, Jay grappled with a flood of emotions, from anger and despair to confusion and disbelief. As the investigation into Laura's death intensified, tensions ran high, with rumors swirling about possible suspects and motives. Every new development seemed to only deepen the mystery surrounding her untimely demise, leaving residents on edge and desperate for answers. Meanwhile, Laura's colleagues and friends refused to let her memory fade away. They organized vigils and memorials, sharing stories of her courage and dedication in the face of adversity. Determined to seek justice for their fallen friend, they vowed to keep her spirit alive by continuing her work and shining a light on the corruption that had claimed her life. But as days turned into weeks and weeks into months, the initial shock began to fade, replaced by a lingering sense of unease and uncertainty. Despite the best efforts of law enforcement and the relentless pursuit of the truth, the case remained unsolved, leaving a gaping hole in the hearts of those who knew and loved Laura. In the quiet moments of reflection, as the sun set over the tranquil streets of Ocala, one question lingered in the minds of residents. Who killed Laura Wilkie, and why? Until that question was answered, the city would remain haunted by the specter of injustice, forever searching for closure in a case that had shaken it to its core. In a twist of disbelief, Laura Wilkie, a respected journalist and fearless investigator, met a tragic end on the scorching morning of July 12, 2007. Detectives Olivia Gressel and Mark Herr, renowned for their meticulous approach to investigations, swiftly arrived at the scene. The Ocala Police Department was determined to solve this heinous crime and bring justice to Laura and her grieving loved ones. As they entered the house, an eerie calm hung in the air. There were no signs of forced entry, suggesting that the killer had either been known to Laura or possessed a level of cunning that allowed them to gain access undetected. The detectives meticulously combed through every inch of the crime scene, searching for any clue that could shed light on Laura's untimely demise. The house appeared immaculately clean, as if someone had meticulously tidied up after the crime. However, their attention was soon drawn to the cause of death: poisoning. The exact substance used remained a mystery, leaving the investigators puzzled and determined to uncover the truth. With a keen eye for detail, the detectives photographed every inch of the crime scene, capturing potential DNA samples and any other evidence that could potentially lead them to the killer. They knew that to solve this perplexing case, they would need to leave no stone unturned. As the investigation unfolded, the town of Ocala was gripped with a sense of unease. The search for the truth intensified, leaving the town anxiously awaiting the day when justice would finally be served. The initial focus of the investigation turned towards Jay Wilkie, a 49-year-old man who owned a flourishing gardening supply store in Ocala, Florida. Known for his friendly demeanor and charm, Jay was a familiar face in the community. However, beneath this amiable facade, there were whispers of a darker side. Detectives Olivia Gressel and Mark Herr delved into Jay's relationship with his wife Laura, searching for any clues that could shed light on a possible motive. They meticulously pieced together the puzzle of their marriage, uncovering a history of turbulence and hidden tensions. As they delved deeper into Jay's personal life, they discovered a series of text messages exchanged between him and Laura in the weeks leading up to her tragic demise. The messages were from Laura begging Jay to stay away from her, indicating cracks in the foundation of their marriage. Determined to uncover the truth, the detectives obtained a warrant to search Jay's phone records, hoping to find more evidence that could connect him to Laura's murder. Simultaneously, they scoured the city for any potential witnesses who may have seen or heard something on the day of the crime. They examined surveillance footage from nearby establishments, hoping to catch a glimpse of any suspicious individuals lurking in the vicinity of Laura's home. As the case gained media attention, tips flooded in from concerned citizens, each one meticulously followed up on by the diligent detectives. Despite the mounting pressure, Jay Wilkie vehemently maintained his innocence, hiring a high-profile defense attorney to speak on his behalf. Meanwhile, Clara Pointer, a 28-year-old co-worker and close friend of Laura Wilkie, emerged as a significant person of interest in the ongoing investigation. As the investigation into Laura Wilkie's murder deepened, Detective Gressel and Detective Herr found themselves facing a tangled web of clues and suspicions. Clara Pointer's emergence as a person of interest added another layer of complexity to the case. Clara, once considered a close friend and co-worker of Laura, now found herself under the scrutiny of law enforcement. Detectives delved into Clara's background, uncovering a series of interactions and encounters between her and Laura in the weeks leading up to the crime. Clara's demeanor shifted under the weight of suspicion as she faced intense questioning from investigators. Her alibis were scrutinized, her motives dissected, and her every move analyzed for any hint of deception. Meanwhile, Jay Wilkie's steadfast denial of involvement in his wife's murder only deepened the mystery. With the evidence against him mounting, Jay's once charming facade began to crack under the pressure of the investigation. As the summer heat bore down relentlessly on Ocala, tensions reached a boiling point. The community grappled with fear and uncertainty, unsure of who could be trusted and haunted by the specter of a killer still at large. Despite the challenges and setbacks, Detective Gressel and Detective Herr remained steadfast in their pursuit of justice. They pored over every piece of evidence, re-interviewed witnesses, and tirelessly followed up on leads, determined to unravel the truth behind Laura Wilkie's tragic death. But as days turned into weeks and weeks into months, the case seemed to hit a dead end. The trail grew cold, and the answers remained elusive. shrouded in a veil of mystery. Yet, amidst the frustration and uncertainty, one thing remained clear. The memory of Laura Wilkie would not be forgotten. Her fearless spirit and unwavering commitment to the truth continued to inspire those who had known her, driving them to seek justice and closure in her name. As the investigation stretched on, the resolve of Detective Gressel and Detective Herr remained unshakable. With each passing day, they grew closer to cracking the case wide open, determined to bring closure to a community left reeling by a crime that had shattered its sense of safety and trust. In the wake of Laura Wilkie's tragic death, Clara Pointer, a journalist like Laura who contributed to Laura's blog, Ocala After Dark, came under suspicion. Known for her ambition and relentless pursuit of success, Clara was rumored to harbor envy towards Laura's achievements and coveted her position as the head of Ocala After Dark. During police interrogations, Clara maintained a calm exterior, deflecting suspicions and denying any involvement in Laura's murder. Instead, she pointed fingers at Jay, Laura's husband, alleging that Laura had expressed fear of him and blamed him for her illness leading to her demise. However, evidence began to mount against Clara. Surveillance footage showed her purchasing a powerful sedative on the morning of Laura's death, the same substance found in Laura's system during the autopsy. Witnesses also reported hearing Clara make disparaging remarks about Laura's success, indicating possible jealousy. A major breakthrough occurred when detectives uncovered a series of emails exchanged between Clara and David Marlborough, a private investigator hired by Laura to uncover corruption. These emails revealed Clara's secret collaboration with David to sabotage Laura's investigations. David, known for his past involvement in high-profile cases, denied any involvement in Laura's murder, but faced scrutiny due to financial struggles and a history of personal grudges. As the investigation unfolded, Clara emerged as the true mastermind behind Laura's murder. Her jealousy and desire to take over Ocala After Dark drove her to manipulate David and orchestrate Laura's demise. With each piece of evidence, the web of suspects grew more intricate, leaving the Ocala community on edge as they awaited justice for Laura's untimely death. Clara, a 28-year-old co-worker and friend of Laura, harbored a deep-seated jealousy and desire for power. She had long coveted Laura's position as the head of Ocala After Dark, and rumors of her envy and resentment towards Laura's success had been circulating for months. However, the true extent of Clara's treachery was beyond anyone's imagination. The police made a breakthrough in the case on July 17, 2007, when they discovered a series of emails between Clara and David Marlborough, a private investigator hired by Laura. These emails revealed Clara's nefarious plans to seduce and manipulate David, who harbored an unhealthy sexual obsession with Laura. David, with a personal vendetta against Laura, inadvertently aided Clara in her sinister plot due to his twisted infatuation. Clara had been secretly poisoning Laura's coffee for months, gradually weakening her. Laura's haunting words, "Don't let my husband near me, he wants me dead," were a chilling reminder of Clara's manipulation and the tragic fate that awaited Laura. But Clara's deceit did not end there. She exploited both Laura's husband, Jay Wilkie, and David, using her sexuality and their vulnerabilities to further her sinister agenda. As the investigation unfolded, the police pieced together Clara's manipulative tactics, exposing the extent of her exploitation. With mounting evidence against her, Clara was arrested at her apartment. Her calculated use of sexuality and manipulation showcased a level of cunning that was truly chilling. The trial that followed was a gripping spectacle, with the courtroom packed with eager spectators. District Attorney Unity Collins led the prosecution, presenting a compelling argument that left no room for doubt about Clara's guilt. Despite the defense attorney's efforts to cast doubt on the evidence and Clara's motives, the weight of evidence against her was overwhelming. Emotions ran high as Laura's family sought justice for their beloved daughter. After hours of deliberation, the jury delivered a unanimous verdict: guilty. Clara Pointer was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole. The verdict brought a mix of relief and anguish to Laura's family and friends, offering them a sense of closure as they began to heal and move forward. For Jay Wilkie, Laura's husband, who had been falsely accused, the verdict brought a mix of relief and grief. As life settled into a new normal for all involved, they cherished the memories of Laura and the impact she had on their lives. Seeking solace, Jay focused on rebuilding his life, pouring his energy into his gardening supply store and reconnecting with friends and family. The support of the Ocala community during the trial became a source of comfort for him. Jay emerged as an advocate for justice reform, using his own experience to raise awareness about wrongful accusations. David Yarbrough, the private investigator unwittingly involved in Clara Pointer's plot, was consumed by guilt. He dedicated himself to making amends, reaching out to Laura's family with a sincere apology and offering assistance in any way he could. David embarked on a personal journey of redemption, vowing to use his investigative skills for good and help other victims of manipulation and deceit. As time passed, wounds began to heal, but the memory of Laura Wilkie remained deeply etched in the hearts of those who knew her. The trial had exposed the dark underbelly of jealousy and manipulation, but also showcased the resilience of a community seeking justice. The impact of Laura's life and untimely death would forever serve as a reminder to cherish the truth and stand against those who seek to deceive. And with that, we conclude this episode of True Crime Story Files. The haunting words of Laura Wilkie, "Don't let my husband near me, he wants me dead," will forever echo in our minds. This tragic tale serves as a reminder of the darkness that can reside within the human heart. Join us next time as we uncover another chilling true crime story, delving into the depths of human nature. To all you true crime story solvers out there, interested in more real-life murder mysteries, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. Do you have any thoughts about this case or have a case of your own you'd like us to investigate? Leave us a comment. Until then, stay safe